The torches in the council chamber burned low, casting long shadows across the stone floor where Nia stood with her wrists bound in silver cord. Dawn had barely crept over the mountain ridge when the guards dragged her from her bed, still wearing the thin nightgown that did nothing to hide the swell of her belly. 7 months pregnant with the pack's heir, and they'd handled her like a criminal. Luna Nia Blackwood. Elder Marcus spoke her title like it tasted sour. You stand accused of attempting to poison Alma Blackwood, mother of our Alpha, with nightshade extract recovered from your clinic stores. The chamber erupted in whispers. Nia's head snapped up, dark eyes wide with shock. Her locks fell across her shoulders, tangled from sleep, and she pushed them back with bound hands. That's impossible. Her voice came out steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. I would never. Silence. The word cut through the hall like a blade. Darius stepped forward from the shadows behind the Elder Council. His presence filled the space the way it always had, broad shoulders rigid beneath his black ceremonial coat, jaw set like granite. But his eyes held nothing she recognized. No warmth, no bond pull, just cold, calculating authority. The evidence is clear. He held up a small glass vial, its contents catching the torchlight. This was found in your private cabinet. The same compound that nearly killed my mother 3 days ago. Darius. She reached for him through the bond, that thread of golden warmth that had connected them since the mating ceremony 2 years ago. Please. You know me. I'm a healer. I save lives, I don't take them. He didn't flinch. Didn't soften. I thought I knew you. His voice carried across the assembled pack, maybe 200 wolves packed into the stone chamber, all of them watching their Luna with suspicion in their eyes. I thought I knew the woman who shared my bed, who carries my child. The words struck like physical blows. Nia stumbled back half a step before catching herself. Someone planted that vial. She forced the words past the tightness in her throat. I've never even handled nightshade extract. Check the clinic logs. Check my purchase records. The records show you ordered the compound 6 weeks ago. Elder Marcus shuffled a stack of papers. Under the pretense of restocking emergency antidotes. No, Nia shook her head, her heart hammering against her ribs. That's wrong. I never ordered. Enough. Darius raised his hand and the chamber fell silent. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, and for one desperate moment Nia thought he was coming to hold her, to tell her this was some terrible mistake. Instead, his fingers closed around the silver pendant at her throat. The Luna's mark, given to her on their mating night, warm with pack magic and the promise of forever. By the authority vested in me as Alpha of the Blackwood Pack, his voice didn't waver, didn't crack. I strip you of the title of Luna. The pendant tore free with a sound like breaking glass. Nia gasped as the bond between them stretched, strained, and then shattered. The golden thread that had lived in her chest for 2 years dissolved into ash and emptiness. She doubled over, one hand clutching her belly, the other pressed to her sternum where something vital had just died. Darius. His name came out as a broken whisper. Please? Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. He turned his back on her. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. For the crime of attempted murder against the Alpha's bloodline, I hereby exile Nia Blackwood from Pack territory. She is to be escorted beyond our borders before noon. Any wolf who gives her shelter will share her fate. The chamber erupted. Some voices rose in shock, others in approval. But Nia heard none of it. She stared at the broad expanse of Darius's back, at the tension in his shoulders, and realized with devastating clarity that the man she'd loved was gone. The child, Elder Marcus stepped forward, his gray beard trembling. Alpha, she carries your heir. The child will be dealt with after its birth. Darius's words were clipped. Final. For now, she goes. Guards flanked her before she could speak. Their hands gripped her arms hard enough to bruise as they hauled her toward the chamber doors. "Wait." She twisted against their hold, panic rising in her throat. "You can't do this. I'm innocent. Someone is framing me." The doors swung open to reveal the gray morning light and the faces of pack members who had called her Luna just yesterday. Now they watched her with disgust, with hatred, with the certainty of wolves who believed their alpha's word without question. "Nia." She looked back at the sound of her name. Zuri stood near the edge of the crowd, her dark skin ashen, her healer's robes wrinkled like she'd just woken. Their eyes met for one brief moment. Something passed between them. Not words, just a flicker of doubt in Zuri's expression. A question that had no answer yet. Then the guards dragged Nia through the doors and into the cold morning air. They gave her 10 minutes to collect her things. 10 minutes in the quarters she'd shared with Darius for 2 years, surrounded by memories of laughter and whispered promises, and the gentle way he'd pressed his palm to her belly when the baby first kicked. She changed into traveling clothes with numb fingers, a warm dress that stretched across her stomach, a heavy cloak, sturdy boots. She packed nothing else. What was left that mattered? The guards escorted her to the western border, where the forest grew thick and the pack's territory ended in a line of ancient stones. Beyond that, nothing but wilderness and the distant roads that led to human settlements. "You have until noon tomorrow to clear the boundary lands." The lead guard, a man named Tomas who had once smiled at her across the dinner hall, spoke without meeting her eyes. "After that, any Blackwood wolf who finds you has orders to treat you as a threat." Nia stepped across the border stones. The moment her foot touched the earth beyond pack territory, a cold emptiness swept through her. The faint hum of pack bonds, the background noise she'd grown so accustomed to, vanished entirely. She was alone. The baby shifted inside her, a small flutter of movement that reminded her she wasn't entirely without purpose. She pressed her hand to the curve of her belly and forced herself to breathe. "I'll find the truth." The words came out stronger than she expected. "I don't know who did this, but I'll find them. And when I do." She didn't finish the thought. The future stretched before her like the dark forest, full of danger and uncertainty, and the gnawing fear that she might not survive long enough to prove her innocence. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something harder. Colder. Darius had looked at her with empty eyes as he tore away everything she'd built. He'd condemned her without letting her speak. Without investigating. Without trusting the bond they'd shared for 2 years. He'd chosen his mother's accusation over the woman carrying his child. Nia turned her back on the border stones and walked into the forest. Each step took her further from the pack that had been her home. Further from the mate who had destroyed her without hesitation. She didn't look back. The wind picked up as she walked, carrying the scent of pine and rain, and the faint musk of prey animals hidden in the underbrush. Her wolf stirred inside her, restless and wounded but still present. They hadn't taken that from her. They couldn't take that from her. 3 miles into the wilderness, she found the Safehouse. It was exactly where the old maps said it would be, a stone cottage built generations ago for wolves traveling between allied territories. Abandoned now, covered in moss and memories but still standing. Nia pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the thin light streaming through cracked windows. A single bed. A cold fireplace. A cabinet that held nothing but cobwebs and the dried remains of someone's forgotten supplies. It wasn't home. It wasn't safety. But it was shelter. She lowered herself onto the edge of the bed and finally let the tears come. Great racking sobs that shook her shoulders and made the baby kick in protest. She cried for the bond that had shattered. For the mate who had betrayed her. For the pack that had watched her fall and done nothing. When the tears finally stopped, the sun had shifted to afternoon angles and her throat was raw. Nia wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked at the empty room, the cold hearth, the uncertain future. Then she got up and started building a fire. Survival first. Justice later. 3 weeks passed in a blur of survival and silence. Nia learned the rhythms of the Safehouse, like a wolf learns her territory. Morning light through the eastern window meant checking the snares she'd set in the underbrush. Afternoon shadows meant hauling water from the creek half a mile north. Evening chill meant stoking the fire high enough to last through the night. Her belly grew heavier with each passing day. The baby moved constantly now, small fists and feet pressing against the walls of her womb like a reminder that she wasn't alone. Not entirely. She talked to the child sometimes. Whispered stories about the pack she'd belonged to, about the clinic where she'd healed broken bones and fevered wolves, about the mate who had once looked at her like she hung the moon. She didn't talk about the exile. Some wounds were too fresh for words. The knock came at dusk on the 21st day. Nia froze with her hand on the kettle. She'd heard nothing approaching. No footsteps. No heartbeat. Either she was losing her edge, or whoever stood outside knew how to move like a ghost. She reached for the iron poker by the hearth. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. "Nia," the voice came through the door, low and urgent. "It's Zuri. Please, I need to talk to you." The poker clattered against the stone floor. Nia crossed the room in 3 steps and yanked open the door. Zuri stood on the threshold, with wild eyes and a satchel clutched to her chest. Her dark skin had gone ashen, her braids escaping their usual neat coils. "You shouldn't be here." Nia's voice came out harder than she intended. "Anyone who helps me? I know the consequences." Zuri pushed past her into the cottage. "I don't care. Close the door." Something in her tone made Nia obey without argument. The latch clicked into place, and the 2 women stood facing each other in the firelight. "How did you find me?" "The old maps. You always loved studying pack history." Zuri's laugh held no humor. "I figured if anyone knew about the abandoned safe houses, it would be you." "Zuri?" Nia pressed her palm to her belly as the baby kicked. "You're risking everything. If Darius finds out..." "Darius is a fool." The words exploded from Zuri like they'd been trapped for weeks. "A blind, manipulated fool who destroyed the best thing that ever happened to this pack." Nia stared at her. In 2 years of friendship, she'd never heard Zuri speak against the Alpha. Not once. "What happened?" Zuri crossed to the rough wooden table and set down her satchel with shaking hands. 3 days after you were exiled, I started asking questions. Quietly. The kind of questions a healer asks when something doesn't add up. She opened the satchel and pulled out a stack of papers. Ledgers. Purchase orders. The familiar forms Nia had filled out hundreds of times during her years running the pack clinic. "You said you never ordered the nightshade extract." Zuri spread the papers across the table. "You were right. These are the real clinic records. The ones that weren't shown to the council." Nia moved closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. The firelight caught the ink on the topmost page, and she stopped breathing. "That's not my signature." "No," Zuri's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not. But it is signed under the authority of someone with access to the clinic supply chain. Someone who could forge purchase orders without raising suspicion." The paper showed a requisition form dated 6 weeks ago. Nightshade extract, 50 milliliters, for research purposes. The signature at the bottom wasn't Nia's careful script. It was a bold, angular scrawl she recognized immediately. Marcus. The name tasted like poison on her tongue. The beta ordered the nightshade. Under his personal authority, Zuri pulled out another paper. "I found this buried in the archive room. He backdated a second order under your name, but he made a mistake. The ink he used wasn't in production until 4 weeks ago." Nia's knees threatened to buckle. She gripped the edge of the table and forced herself to stay upright. "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why would Marcus frame me?" What did I ever do to him? Zuri's expression shifted. Something darker flickered behind her eyes. It wasn't Marcus alone. She reached into the satchel again and withdrew a small recording device. Pack technology, the kind used for preserving elder testimonies and historical records. Nia, I need you to sit down before I play this. The cottage suddenly felt too small. The fire too hot. The shadows too deep. Nia lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, one hand cradling her belly protectively. Tell me. Alma Blackwood isn't dead. Zuri's words landed like stones in still water. She's dying, but not from poison. She has a wasting sickness that's been eating at her for years. The healers have kept it quiet at her request. I don't understand. Nia shook her head. They said I tried to kill her? You didn't poison her? Nobody poisoned her. Zuri pressed a button on the recording device. She poisoned herself, just enough to make it look like an assassination attempt. The device crackled to life, and then Alma Blackwood's voice filled the cottage, thin and reedy but unmistakably hers. I'm recording this because I know I won't live to see the consequences of what I've done, but someone should know the truth. Nia's hands clenched in her lap. My son chose poorly when he mated that woman. A healer. A nobody from a minor pack with no bloodline worth mentioning. Alma's voice dripped with contempt. I told him she wasn't worthy of carrying the Blackwood heir. He didn't listen. So I found another way. A wet cough interrupted the recording. Then Alma continued. Marcus helped me obtain the nightshade. We planted the vial in her clinic. I took just enough of the poison to make myself ill, to give Darius the evidence he needed to remove her. Another cough. It worked. She's gone. The child can be raised properly by wolves who understand what it means to lead. The recording ended. Silence crashed through the cottage like a wave. Nia couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the enormity of what she'd just heard. She confessed. The words came out hollow. She destroyed my life because she didn't think I was good enough for her son. She's dying, Nia. Zuri knelt beside the bed and took her hands. The healers give her a week at most. Her mind has been going for months. That's why she finally told the truth. She doesn't have the strength to maintain the lie anymore. Does Darius know? The question hung in the air between them. Not yet. Zuri's grip tightened. But the council is calling an emergency session tomorrow night. They've received word that new evidence has surfaced in your case. New evidence? Nia stared at the recording device on the table. You're going to play this for them? We're going to play this for them. Zuri's eyes burned with a fire Nia had never seen before. You're coming back, Nia. You're going to stand in that council chamber and watch every single wolf who condemned you realize exactly what they did. The baby kicked hard against Nia's ribs. She pressed her palm to the spot and felt the small foot push back. If I go back, if Darius sees me, the bond wound throbbed in her chest, that empty place where golden warmth used to live. I don't know if I can face him. You don't have to forgive him, Zuri's voice softened. You don't have to take him back. But you deserve to be heard, Nia. You deserve to watch them understand how wrong they were. Nia looked at the papers spread across the table. The forged signatures. The damning records. The recorded confession of a dying woman who had orchestrated her destruction out of nothing but spite and prejudice. 3 weeks ago, she'd walked into this cottage with nothing but grief and the desperate hope of survival. Now she had something else. Proof. When do we leave? Zuri's smile was sharp as a blade. Dawn. I know a path that avoids the border patrols. She rose and began gathering the papers. Rest tonight. You'll need your strength for what comes next. Nia watched her pack the evidence with careful hands. Tomorrow, she would return to the pack that had cast her out. Tomorrow, she would face the mate who had shattered their bond without hesitation. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come to light. The forest swallowed them before first light. Nia followed Zuri through paths she'd never known existed, narrow trails that wound between ancient oaks and across streams so shallow they barely wet her boots. Her belly ached with the weight of the baby, but she didn't slow. Couldn't slow. Every step brought her closer to the reckoning she'd been denied. How much further? Her breath came in short bursts. Another mile. Zuri glanced back, her braids swinging. There's a cellar entrance near the old training grounds. We'll come up inside the main hall. The main hall, where she'd stood as Luna for 2 years, where she'd been stripped of everything that mattered. Nia's jaw tightened. She pressed forward. The sun had risen fully by the time they reached the pack's outer territory. Zuri led her down a steep embankment to a moss-covered door set into the hillside. The hinges groaned as they pushed through into darkness. Stay close. Zuri's voice echoed off stone walls. The passage connects to the council chamber's lower level. They moved through the tunnel in silence. Nia counted her heartbeats, counted her breaths, counted the kicks from the baby who seemed to sense the tension coiling through her mother's body. Voices filtered down from above. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, the low rumble of a pack assembled for judgment. Zuri stopped at the base of a narrow staircase. The council session started an hour ago. They're reviewing the new evidence I submitted anonymously. What evidence? The purchase orders. The ink analysis. Zuri's hand closed around Nia's arm. They don't know about the confession yet. That revelation comes from you. Nia's chest tightened. You want me to walk in there and... I want you to stand in front of every wolf who watched you fall and make them understand what happened. Zuri's eyes burned in the dim light. Can you do that? The bond wound pulsed in Nia's chest. That empty space where Darius's presence used to live, warm and golden and full of promises he'd broken without hesitation. She thought of the way he'd looked at her that morning in the council chamber. Cold. Certain. Already gone. Yes. The word came out like iron. I can do that. Zuri nodded and pressed something into her palm. The recording device. Small enough to hide in her hand. When you're ready? Not before. They climbed the stairs together. The voices grew louder with each step, sharpening into distinct arguments. The ink evidence is compelling, but it proves nothing about the Luna's innocence. If the beta forged those orders, he should answer for it. We cannot simply reverse an alpha's judgment without... The door at the top of the stairs opened into a small alcove behind the main dais. Nia pressed herself against the wall and peered through a gap in the curtains. The council chamber looked exactly as she remembered. Stone walls rising to vaulted ceilings. Torches burning in iron sconces. The Alpha's throne at the far end, elevated above the crowd. Darius sat in that throne with his hands gripping the armrests. His jaw was clenched so tight, Nia could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. He wore black, as always, the color of authority and mourning. She wondered which one he was dressed for. To his right stood Marcus, the beta, his broad face a mask of calm that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. He was speaking, his voice carrying across the assembled pack. These accusations are baseless. Someone has clearly tampered with the clinic records in an attempt to discredit. The ink doesn't lie, Marcus. Elder Josephine cut him off, her silver hair catching the torchlight. We had the documents analyzed by 3 separate experts. The requisition form submitted as evidence against the former Luna was created weeks after the supposed purchase date. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Nia counted the faces. 200 wolves, maybe more, pressed into every corner of the chamber. Some looked confused. Others looked angry. None of them looked at the empty space where she should have been standing. If the evidence was falsified, an elder near the front leaned forward. Then we must consider the possibility that the former Luna was wrongly accused. Wrongly accused? Marcus laughed, but the sound came out sharp. She had the poison in her clinic. The Alpha's mother nearly died. Your mother. Every head turned toward the alcove. Toward Nia, who had stepped through the curtains without consciously deciding to move. The silence that crashed through the chamber was absolute. Darius rose from his throne. His face went white, then red, then something Nia couldn't name. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. Your mother, Nia's voice carried clear and steady across the stone floor. She walked forward, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other clutching the recording device. She's the one you should be questioning. Guards, Marcus's voice cracked. The exile has returned. Remove her. Touch her, and I'll have your hands. Zuri stepped from the shadows behind Nia, her healer's robes replaced with the formal garb of a council witness. She has evidence to present. The law demands she be heard. Elder Josephine held up her hand. The guards that had started forward halted in their tracks. She's right. The elder's eyes moved from Nia to Darius to Marcus. Pack law grants any accused wolf the right to present new evidence before a full council session. We denied her that right 3 weeks ago. She was found with the poison, Marcus started. I was framed. Nia lifted the recording device. And I can prove it. The chamber erupted. Voices shouting, wolves pushing forward, the crash of chaos breaking against the walls. Darius hadn't moved. He stood beside his throne like a statue, staring at Nia with an expression she couldn't read. Silence! Elder Josephine's voice cut through the noise. The chamber stilled. Former Luna Nia, you claim to have evidence of your innocence? I have more than that. Nia's fingers found the button on the recording device. I have a confession. She pressed play. Alma Blackwood's voice filled the council chamber. Thin, reedy, unmistakable. I'm recording this because I know I won't live to see the consequences of what I've done. But someone should know the truth. Darius staggered back half a step. His hand found the arm of his throne and gripped it like a drowning man grasping driftwood. My son chose poorly when he mated that woman. A healer. A nobody from a minor pack with no bloodline worth mentioning. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Wolves exchanged horrified glances. I told him she wasn't worthy of carrying the Blackwood heir. He didn't listen. So I found another way. Marcus bolted for the side door. 2 guards intercepted him before he'd taken 3 steps. Marcus helped me obtain the nightshade. We planted the vial in her clinic. I took just enough of the poison to make myself ill, to give Darius the evidence he needed to remove her. The recording continued, but Nia wasn't listening anymore. She was watching Darius. The color had drained from his face entirely. He looked like a man watching his world collapse around him, piece by piece, certainty by certainty. Good. It worked. She's gone. The child can be raised properly by wolves who understand what it means to lead. The confession ended. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Darius. Elder Josephine's voice held a tremor it hadn't held before. Did you know about this? No. The word came out broken. He turned to look at Nia, and for the first time since the exile she saw something human in his eyes. Nia, you didn't ask. She held his gaze without flinching. You didn't investigate. You didn't trust me. You looked at your mother's lies and your Beta's forgeries, and you chose them over the woman carrying your child. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, a reminder, a purpose. I'm innocent. I've always been innocent. And now this entire pack knows what you did to me. The silence that followed Nia's declaration stretched like a wound torn open. Elder Josephine rose from her seat, her silver hair catching the torchlight as she turned to face the assembled council. Her voice, when it came, held the weight of judgment. Marcus Blackwood, Beta of this pack. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. You have heard the confession. You have seen the evidence of forged documents bearing your authority. What say you? Marcus struggled against the guards holding him. His face had gone the color of old ash, desperation cracking through the mask he'd worn for weeks. She was dying anyway. The words spilled out like venom. Alma was dying, and she wanted to protect the bloodline. I was helping her protect. You were helping her destroy an innocent woman. Elder Josephine's voice cut like a blade. You conspired to frame your Luna. You watched her be exiled while carrying the pack's heir. You said nothing. The chamber erupted again. Wolves surged forward, voices rising in a tide of fury that crashed against the stone walls. Someone threw something. Glass shattered. Order! Darius's voice boomed across the hall. For one moment, the Alpha's authority held. The crowd stilled. But when Nia looked at him, she saw the truth, written in every line of his body. He wasn't commanding anymore. He was drowning. The council will vote. Elder Josephine raised her hand. On the matter of Marcus Blackwood, former Beta. All in favor of stripping his rank and banishing him from pack territory? Hands rose across the chamber. Every elder, every senior wolf. The vote was unanimous before the count finished. It is done. The elder's voice rang clear. Marcus Blackwood, you are stripped of rank and banished from Blackwood territory. You have until dawn to leave. Any wolf who gives you shelter shares your fate. The same sentence Darius had spoken to her 3 weeks ago. The same cold finality, now turned against its architect. Nia watched the guards drag Marcus toward the chamber doors. He was screaming something about loyalty, about protecting the pack, but she couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears. Justice. This was what justice felt like, but it wasn't enough. Nia. Darius's voice pulled her attention back to the dais. He had descended from his throne and stood 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the fine tremor in his hands. The bond wound in her chest throbbed at his proximity, that empty space where warmth used to live. Nia, He stopped, started again. I should have listened. I should have trusted you. You should have done a lot of things. She kept her voice steady, kept her spine straight. You didn't. I know. He took another step toward her, and she saw the moisture gathering in his eyes. The great Alpha of Blackwood, brought low by his own blindness. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Please. Let me restore the bond. Let me... No. The word landed like a stone in still water. Darius froze. The chamber went quiet again, every wolf straining to hear. No. Nia said it again, tasting the power of it on her tongue. You don't get to break me and then decide you want me back when the truth becomes inconvenient. Nia, please. His voice cracked. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I was wrong. I was so wrong. But the bond you severed. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick against her palm. The bond you tore from my chest while I begged you to listen. While I carried your child. The elders exchanged glances. This was pack law territory now. The future of the heir, the bloodline, the succession itself. The child. Elder Josephine spoke carefully. The child is still the Alpha's heir. Pack law is clear on matters of succession. Pack law is also clear on matters of maternal rights. Nia turned to face the Elder Council. I claim my child's birthright as heir to the Blackwood line. I do not claim the father. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. You can't. Darius started forward, but Elder Josephine raised her hand. She can. The elder's voice held something that might have been respect. Pack law allows a wrongly accused Luna to claim her child's inheritance while rejecting the bond that produced it. It's rarely invoked, but the precedent exists. I won't let you take my child from me. Darius's voice had gone ragged. I won't let you, like you let your mother take me from everything I loved. Nia held his gaze without flinching. You taught me what it means to lose everything, Darius. You taught me what it costs to be powerless, while someone else decides your fate. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle movement that reminded her why she was here, why she had survived 3 weeks alone in the wilderness. why she had walked back into this chamber knowing it might destroy her all over again. Not for him, never again for him. For her child. For herself. I'll raise this baby with or without your blessing. She addressed the council now, not Darius. I'll teach them what it means to lead with honor. What it means to seek truth before judgment. What it means to protect the innocent instead of destroying them. Elder Josephine nodded slowly. And if the council recognizes your claim, what then? Then I walk out of this hall with my dignity intact. Nia lifted her chin. Something your alpha tried to take from me and failed. The vote came quickly. Faster than Nia expected, though perhaps the elders were tired of watching Darius suffer the weight of his choices. Perhaps they recognized that the pack needed new leadership, new blood, new ways of thinking. Or perhaps they simply saw what Nia saw when she looked at the man who had once been her mate. A wolf who had chosen wrong when it mattered most? The council recognizes Nia's claim to her child's birthright. Elder Josephine's voice rang across the chamber. The heir of Blackwood will be raised under her guidance, with full access to pack resources and protection. The bond between Alpha and Luna remains severed. This judgment is final. Darius made a sound like something dying. Nia didn't look at him, couldn't afford to. If she looked at him now, she might see the man she'd loved instead of the one who destroyed her. She might feel the pull of what they'd shared instead of the emptiness he'd carved into her chest. She turned and walked toward the chamber doors. The crowd parted before her. Wolves who had watched her fall 3 weeks ago now stepped aside with lowered eyes. Some reached out as she passed, touching her arm, her shoulder, offering silent apologies she didn't have the strength to accept. Nia, Darius's voice, one last time, broken, pleading. She paused at the threshold but didn't turn around. I hope you find peace, Darius. Her voice carried clear across the chamber. But you won't find it with me? The doors swung open to reveal the morning light. The pack grounds stretched before her, familiar and foreign all at once. The place she'd called home for 2 years. The place she'd been dragged from in chains. Zuri waited at the bottom of the steps, a traveling cloak draped over her arm, and something fierce burning in her expression. Ready? Nia breathed in the cool morning air, felt the baby kick one more time, strong and certain. Ready? They walked together toward the pack gates. Behind them, the council chamber erupted in voices as wolves processed what they'd witnessed. The fall of a beta. The humiliation of an alpha. The rise of a woman who'd refused to stay broken. The gates stood open, not to cast her out this time, but to let her choose. Nia stepped through them with her head high. The morning sun caught the curve of her belly, gilded the dark coils of her locks, warmed the deep brown of her skin. She carried the future of the Blackwood line in her body and the truth of her innocence in her heart. Behind her, the sound of the gates closing echoed across the mountain ridge. Darius stood on the other side, watching everything he'd destroyed walk away. She didn't look back. The road stretched before her, uncertain but free. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Nia smiled. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and stand with our pack for the next one.